Clara rode to the dawn's dust, the first blush of light bleeding over the Wyoming plains as Samuel's cry pierced the cool morning air. The rhythmic clatter of her horse's hooves mingled with the soft whimper of her infant, creating a somber melody that spoke of both hope and heartache. The wide expanse of the territory, brushed with hues of amber and violet, stretched before her like an unwritten promise of refuge, a promise that had drawn her away from a past filled with rejection and sorrow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. For months, Clara had borne the weight of a world that no longer held room for a single mother and her child. With every mile traveled along the dusty trail, the echoes of her former life faded behind her like ghostly whispers in the wind. The sharp scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth filled the air, a constant reminder that survival out here was both brutal and beautiful. And though weariness tugged at her limbs, an inner resolve burned as brightly as the rising sun, an unspoken vow to keep Samuel safe at any cost. Arriving on the outskirts of Sage Hollow, a modest town clinging stubbornly to existence amid rugged hills, Clara slowed her pace. The wooden structures, with their peeling paint and creaking signboards, seemed to stand as weary sentinels guarding the fragile hopes of those who dare to dream in this unforgiving land. She guided her horse toward the center town, where life bustled at a subdued, determined rhythm despite the hardships etched into every face. At the town's edge, where a dusty main street stretched beneath a sky smeared with the soft glow of morning, Clara's eyes caught sight of a sprawling ranch. Its expansive fields of dry, wind-rusted grass and a weathered log cabin exuded a sense of isolation and quiet dignity. It was here that Elias, a lonesome rancher known among the sparse community for his taciturn kindness and haunted eyes, plied his trade, a man whose own tragedies whispered silently on the prairie winds. Clara dismounted her horse with careful deliberation, the chill of early morning settling into the fabric of her worn calico dress. Cradling Samuel close, she carried him across the uneven dirt road toward the ranch. Every step stirred up faint puffs of dust that glittered in the light, like tiny shards of lost hope. As she neared the sturdy wooden fence that bordered the property, the creak of its old boards softened her apprehension, and she sensed that here, perhaps, she might finally find a measure of sanctuary. Elias was outside, mending a break in a corral with a calm precision that belied the storms he had weathered in his own past. His broad shoulders and calloused hands told a silent story of long days spent contending with the land's relentless insistence on survival. When he looked up, his gaze met Clara's with a measured warmth, a look that hinted at deeper sorrows and unspoken understanding. Without a word, he stepped forward, extending an offer of shelter with the simple dignity of his presence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady, "I reckon you've had a hard road." There was a gentle quality in his tone, a kindness that wrapped around the words like a warm but cherished blanket. "Come on in. You and that little one are welcome to rest here for a spell." His invitation, sincere and unadorned, stirred a tentative hope in Clara's heart. Though her eyes were wary, they shone with gratitude as she nodded in silent assent. Within the modest confines of the ranch, the interior exuded a rustic charm, a warm cabin illuminated by the glow of a hand-fed lantern, its light dancing over rough-hewn beams and well-loved furniture. The air was redolent with the scent of pine logs and the faint trace of leather, evoking memories of simpler times interlaced with hardship. Samuel's crying subsided as he was gently reassured by both the soft murmur of a creek outside and the peaceful ambience that now cradled them. As Clara settled into this unexpected reprieve, she took note of small details that hinted at Elias's own burdens. A faded portrait on the mantel showed a smiling family, a past life that had clearly been lost to time and misfortune, perhaps a wife, or even a sister, whose absence seemed to weigh heavily upon him. In that silent acknowledgment of mutual loss, a bond began to form between them, a fragile promise that what had been broken might one day be healed. Yet, as the tranquility of the cabin wrapped around them like a soft shawl, a ripple of unrest seeped through the air. At the edge of the room, Near the door, a stable hand muttered under his breath as he passed a folded piece of paper, a message that had clearly traveled from the town center. His furtive glance and the tremor in his hand did not go unnoticed by Elias, who casually retrieved a note and read it with growing concern. The paper bore a hastily scrawled warning, its words cutting through serenity like a sharp gust of prairie wind. A note that spoke of how newcomers tended to bring messages, uncertain omens of trouble or whispered secrets from those who lurked in the shadows of Sage Hollow. Clara's heart lurched as Elias's eyes met hers momentarily, filled with a gravity that belied his calm exterior. Though he said nothing aloud, the unspoken caution in his gaze resonated deeply within her. The warning suggested trouble might be on the horizon, a threat cloaked in the usual prejudices and hidden dangers that so often plagued the frontier. For Clara, who had fled the judgment and rejection of her past, the prospect of further scrutiny was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, the flicker of hope she had nurtured in the open arms of Elias's hospitality was not so easily extinguished. As the day progressed, light grew stronger, and the quiet rhythms of the ranch were punctuated by both the gentle tasks of tending to animals and the soft murmur of hushed conversation. The stable hand's warning remained a subtle, persistent reminder that life on the frontier was never without its complications. Outside, the wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying with it secrets from distant corners, a rustle of impending challenges, waiting like shadows to overtake the bright promise of a new beginning. In that delicate balance of refuge and uncertainty, Clara found herself standing at a crossroads. Samuel, now dozing quietly in her arms, seemed to embody the fragile yet potent symbol of a second chance, a life that might yet flourish in a land both harsh and hopeful. With every beat of her heart, the pain of past rejection mingled with a cautious optimism. In the soft glow of the fading morning, as Elias moved with purpose to secure the ranch against the encroaching dusk, Clara wondered if fate had truly brought her to Sage Hollow for a reason. The note, now folded neatly and tucked away, weighed like a silent portent on the back of her mind. Was it merely the idle gossip of fearful townsfolk, or did it mark a more tangible threat, one that could undermine the delicate sanctuary that Elias's ranch represented? With a final glance toward the door where the warning had been delivered, Clara set her resolve, whispering a silent prayer that neither prejudice nor the ghost of the past would darken the promise of this new beginning. As the sun climbed higher in the Wyoming sky, casting long shadows across the ranch's weathered facade, Clara and Elias shared a look, a moment of wordless understanding that this refuge, hard-won and delicate, was worth protecting at all costs. Unbeknownst to them, the horizon held further challenges and opportunities in equal measure, and the unfolding day promised to unveil secrets that might yet alter the course of their lives. Clara's determination solidified as she prepared to embrace the uncertain future ahead. With Samuel safe in her arms and Elias standing resolute by her side, the harsh winds of the frontier seemed momentarily tamed by the quiet strength of their newfound hope. But as she settled down to rest the night beneath a sky painted in the deep indigo of approaching dusk, an uneasy question lingered in her heart. What true weight did that mysterious warning carry, and who in Sage Hollow would soon come calling with news that might change everything? And so, as the lanterns were lit and shadows danced along the rough-hewn walls of the cabin, the promise of sanctuary was both a balm and a subtle harbinger of challenges to be faced. The dusty roads of the past were behind her, yet the uncertain whispers of the present foretold that the journey of healing and redemption had only just begun. Clara woke to the mingled scent of sagebrush and damp pine, as if the very land whispered secrets of endurance and hidden trials. The morning light, pale and unyielding, filtered through the gaps in the cabin's roughly hewn wooden walls. Outside, the Wyoming Territory in 1878 stretched vast and relentless, a terrain that had learned to harbor both hope and heartbreak. As she blinked away sleep, Clara regarded the small hand curled around her heart. Samuel's tiny fingers, still clutching the soft cloth of his makeshift blanket. His gentle coos were a promise against the loneliness of the past, a sound that stirred something tender within Clara's guarded soul. Within the modest log cabin at the heart of Elias's ranch, life had slowly begun to take on the shape of survival and quiet renewal. The cabin's interior, warmed by the glow of a hand-fed lantern and persistent crackle of a low-burning stove, bore the marks of both hard labor and care. Rough pine beams, scarred from years of weathering elements, formed the framework of this sanctuary. Clara, still recovering from long-ago betrayals and the harsh judgment of forsaken family, now found a rhythm in the shared quiet tasks that filled each day. By mid-morning, as the sun climbed higher and cast long, slanting shadows across the ranch's yard, Clara set to work with a determined grace. Elias had long offered her and Samuel refuge, and the gentle cadence of ranch life soon became part of her own healing journey. Together, they fetched water from the nearby creek, its clear, cold murmur echoing over smooth stones. They mended broken fence lines, the creak of each worn plank a reminder that nothing here was perfect, yet every small repair was a step toward safety. Elias, tall and imposing with a face etched by loss, joined her with measured steps. His presence was a quiet reassurance, a silent promise that he, too, had known grief and the bitter tang of regret. "All is as it should be, ma'am," Elias would say softly at times, his voice a measured blend of kindness and melancholy, "so long as we hold true to what we're building here." His words, spoken while leaning over splintered fences or while carefully tending to a stubborn calf, resonated with an almost ritualistic truth. As Clara and Elias worked side by side, the boundaries between their separate worlds began to blur. A mutual understanding formed in shared labor and whispered confidences beneath the vast, unyielding sky. When dusk settled and twilight draped its somber veil over the sagebrush plains, Clara found herself sitting near the fire, cradling Samuel in her arms. The gentle pop of burning logs, accompanied by the rhythmic hush of the night wind through the cottonwoods, provided a steady cadence to the soft murmur of conversation. Elias, after a day of uncompromising work, spoke little, but his infrequent words carried the weight of a careful soul. It was during one such quiet evening that Clara's attention was drawn to a delicate object almost hidden in the wooden confines of a battered old drawer. As she rummaged through a collection of keepsakes and weathered letters, a repository of memories not originally her own, a small silver locket tumbled into her hand. Its surface was engraved with intricate designs, and on its polished face a faint inscription caught the light, a single, barely legible name, perhaps that of a beloved sibling lost to time. The locket, cool and surprisingly heavy in her palm, sparked a quiet curiosity in Clara. Though it was not hers, the locket felt imbued with wistful significance, a relic of Elias's past sorrows, a tangible memento of a life that had once brimmed with love and laughter before tragedy claimed it. In a hushed moment that stretched like the long Wyoming plains, Elias noticed her studying the locket intently. His rugged features, typically stoic, softened with unspoken vulnerability. "That belonged to my sister," he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was young and full of promise. Loss is a way of collecting our treasures and memories like the wind collects dust on the plains." His confession, imbued with both sorrow and resignation, laid bare the tender scars he carried beneath his rough exterior. For Clara, the locket was now a symbol, a small, gleaming tribute to the interconnectedness of loss and hope, echoing her own battered past and her steady, emerging future. Not all evenings at the ranch, however, were wrapped in reflective solitude and genuine companionship. Amid the tranquility of Sage Hollow, whispers of suspicion and prejudice began to stir. Early next morning, as Clara prepared a meager breakfast over a small wood-fired stove, a messenger from town, a shopkeeper known for keeping a keen ear on local gossip, quietly mentioned in passing, "Heard tell of a woman like you wander in our town. Folks might be wondering where you come from and what you're looking for." His tone, though not openly hostile, carried a venom of long-held judgments. Rumors, as delicate and dangerous as a hawk's talon, could quickly dismantle any fragile sanctuary Clara had begun to build. Later that day, while tending to chores that involved repairing a buckboard harness and stacking firewood along the perimeter of the ranch, Elias approached her with a troubled expression. "Ma'am, I ran into one of the men from town. He reckoned he saw a feller asking questions about you. Said he was looking for a woman who might be on the run from her past." Elias's words, laced with quiet apprehension, sent a shiver along Clara's spine. The conversation confirmed what the quiet stares and whispered rumors had hinted at. Not only did the town view her with suspicion, but there were those who might even profit from it. A bounty hunter, fixated on tracking women like her, women perceived as outcasts or runaways, was apparently on their trail. The gravity of the situation pressed down on Clara as she recalled fragments of her own painful past. A family divided by scorn and betrayal. In dim moments of recollection, the fleeting images of harsh voices, quick dismissals, and cold, unforgiving glares merged into a storm of regret and resolve. Yet, as Samuel stirred contentedly in her arms, his innocent coos a counterpoint to the harshness of memory, Clara's determination hardened like the crust atop a winter river. That evening, as the stars began to prick the dust with fragile light, the ranch fell into a tentative stillness. In hushed tones by the fire, Elias and Clara exchanged their quiet fears and hopes. Beneath the low murmur of the prairie night, they speculated over the nature of the threat that the shopkeeper's whisper had revealed. Elias mentioned that a lone bounty hunter had been seen near the outskirts of Sage Hollow, a solitary figure whose presence foretold trouble rather than redemption. Although the bounty hunter's exact intent was cloaked in uncertainty, his interest in a woman of Clara's description was a danger they could not ignore. As the fire's glow waned and the chill deepened, Clara clutched the silver locket, its cool surface a soothing reminder of shared loss and the promise of healing. The engraved name remained a mystery for now, a relic of the past that linked Elias's broken memories with the uncertain future they might yet forge together. Samuel, cradled against her bosom, seemed to embody the possibility of new beginnings amid struggles and whispered threats. Before sleep could claim the quiet night, a distant sound, a steady, deliberate crunch of boots on frosted ground, stirred the silence. From outside the cabin's modest window, the faint echo of an approaching man disturbed the stillness. Elias's face, illuminated by the flickering light of the dying fire, assumed a look of grim concern as he gazed toward the darkened porch. Clara's heart quickened. The bounty hunter's presence had transformed from whispered rumor into a tangible menace. In that moment, as the ranch lay suspended between hope and the encroaching uncertainty of the night, Clara and Elias exchanged a look heavy with unspoken resolve. The fragile, budding sanctuary they were creating on the fringes of Sage Hollow was now under the shadow of imminent danger. With the silver locket still warm in her hand and the soft coos of Samuel echoing like a lullaby of promise, Clara knew that their fight for a better future was just beginning. And as the solitary footsteps of the intruder grew nearer, the wind carried a chilling reminder. The frontier's harsh judgment was never far behind, always ready to test the strength of those daring enough to build a new life from the ruins of the past. Hoofbeats echoed beyond the sagebrush at dawn, a measured, relentless cadence that stirred the stillness and carried a shadow ever closer to the ranch. In the gloom of early morning, Clara peered through a cracked window, heart pounding as the sound mingled with the distant rustle of wind in the cottonwood trees. Samuel's soft coos, nurtured by the secure warmth of the cabin, contrasted with the growing tension outside. Somewhere in those distant tracks, a bounty hunter drew nearer, intent on questioning the allure of a woman like Clara, a woman whose troubled past and tender hope seemed to pluck at the dark undercurrents of Sage Hollow. Inside, the log cabin glowed with the amber light of a single oil lamp. The air carried the nostalgic aroma of pine shavings and that faint tang of wood smoke, a comforting contrast to the threat lingering just beyond the threshold. Elias, whose eyes had seen far too much cruelty in a harsh world, sat by the fire. He gently cradled a worn leather journal in one hand as he waited for Clara to join him. As she emerged with Samuel swaddled in a soft blanket, the quiet of the interior was broken by the soft creak of floorboards and the low murmur of a coming storm outside. For a long while, silence reigned between them as the flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on rough-hewn walls. Finally, Elias spoke in a measured tone. "Ma'am, I reckon this here threat ain't leaving us in peace. I heard word from the townsfolk today. Some feller's been asking pointed questions about a woman on the run and her babe. They say there's a bounty on her kin." Clara's grip tightened around Samuel, her eyes dark with worry but resolute. "That bounty hunter," she replied softly, "was seen questioning the shopkeeper once more. It ain't just idle rumor now, Elias. Folks talk, and when talk turns to profit, judgment follows close behind." Her words, calm yet edged with determination, cut through the room's heaviness. As the wind outside began to whip and the first gray clouds gathered, the two found solace in the fragile privacy of the firelight. Over a modest supper of stale bread and hardtack, they shared pieces of their past. Elias' gaze softened as he recounted his sorrow, a tale of a beloved sister lost to a swift fever in a cold winter unkind to frail. "She always said to me, 'Hold fast, dear brother, even when the night's darkest.'" He ran his fingers reverently over the silver locket resting on the shelf nearby, its delicate engraving, a single word etched in a careful script. "Hold fast," had once belonged to his sister, a final message that now bridged the gap between his grief and his hope. Clara listened intently, her own past unraveling in hesitant confession. "I was cast out by my own kin," she murmured, almost inaudibly, "for a sin I did not commit. They claimed I betrayed their ways by loving a man they could not reckon with, so much as a runaway, unworthy of their honor." The weight of her memory was palpable, her voice quivering like a fragile reed in the wind. Yet in that vulnerable sharing, a bond began to form, an unspoken accord between two souls scarred by loss and prejudice. The flames in the hearth seemed to burn brighter as Elias's voice grew tender yet urgent. "Clara, I've been thinking, this threat from that bounty hunter, we ain't likely to stand against it if you stay on your own. I know this may sound sudden, but I reckon the safest way to shield you and young Samuel is to have you join me in more than fellowship. Marriage, perhaps, might serve as a stout barrier against the hungry whispers and even the aimed attacks of those who seek to profit from your sorrow." His proposal, as gentle as it was bold, hung heavy in the charged air. In those few words lay not merely a vow of legal union, but a pledge of protection, an offering of shared fate against the tyrannies of the frontier. Yet Clara's heart fluttered with conflict. On one hand, the idea of binding her life to Elias provided a comforting sense of belonging, an antidote to the relentless rejection that had driven her away from her family. On the other, the proposal stoked old scars of betrayal and mistrust. Her mind raced with images of her past, whispered dismissals by uncaring relatives, harsh glances in the lamplight of sad country parlors. The very word marriage evoked memories as bitter as they were fleeting, a reminder that promises on the frontier were as transient as morning dew under the relentless sun. Samuel, oblivious to the complexity unfolding around him, cooed softly, a small, persistent beacon of hope amid the uncertainty. The child's laughter, light as a chime of a distant bell, offered reprieve from the tension. Elias's gentle gaze searched hers for understanding. "I don't ask for your secrets, Clara," he murmured. "I only reckon that together we might forge something strong enough to block out the gloom that follows us. I won't pretend I can erase your past, but I can offer you a future, a shelter from the bitter winds, a home where the chatter of judgment fades into background." His voice was earnest, carrying the weight of regrets and the promise of redemption. Like the quiet fall of snow onto hardened ground, the silver locket, still gleaming with its cryptic inscription, lay a silent witness to their unfolding conversation. Clara, drawn by its promise, retrieved it from its resting place on a battered shelf. Holding it between trembling fingers, she studied the inscription. "Hold fast," she repeated softly, letting the words seep deep into the recesses of her heart. It spoke of endurance and resilience, a mantra as much as a memento, and now it resonated with the promise of Elias's words. Yet, As the rising wind set the sagebrush tapping on the cabin's frame, a sudden sound at the door startled them both. Footsteps approached with measured urgency, distinct even in the soft clamor of the storm that was gathering outside. Elias's eyes darkened as he rose to peer through the dusty glass. Outside, silhouetted against the bleak gray of a fast-approaching pre-storm sky, stood the bounty hunter, a lone, hard-featured man whose presence was as chilling as the gust that bore his arrival. The bounty hunter's shadow lingered by the doorway, as if waiting for an invitation or confession, his eyes, narrow and calculating, swept over the objects in the room before settling on Clara with a look that spoke of secrets and profit. For a moment, the silence was broken only by the distant creak of a loose shutter and the soft murmur of the wind. Clara's heart raced anew. The bounty hunter's presence transformed the quiet sanctum of the cabin into a stage where every whispered word and tender promise was now imbued with peril. Elias stepped forward decisively, his hand hovering near his holster. "I reckon you ain't welcome here," he stated, voice low and even, betraying an edge of resolve. The bounty hunter met his gaze evenly for a long, loaded moment, then slowly retreated into the swirling dusk, leaving behind a lingering threat that made the air feel colder. In the aftermath, as the intruder's footsteps faded into the distance, the silence deepened once again. The taste of fear and a hint of despair, mixed with the delicate promise of the locket's words. Clara's gaze shifted from the departing figure to Elias's earnest eyes and then back to the silver locket. Her mind churned with questions. Was this bounty hunter driven by a mere desire for profit, or did he carry a grudge linked to her past, a past marred by betrayal and rejection? What price, she wondered, would she have to pay for accepting Elias's offer, for allowing herself to believe in a future where beloved Samuel's laughter could drown out the scorn of a world unyielding? Tension and uncertainty coiled around her like the gathering storm clouds outside. Yet in that charged moment, Samuel stirred in her arms, his soft, innocent murmur momentarily dispelling the dark doubts that had taken root. Standing there amidst the flickering light of the dying fire, Clara felt the pull of both trepidation and hope, a call to reclaim the strength buried beneath years of quiet suffering. The night wore on, and as the storm's first droplets began to fall against the cabin's weathered roof, Clara found herself at a crossroads. Elias's proposal, laced with promises of protection and shared burdens, beckoned her to step into a future that promised more than isolation. And yet, the bounty hunter's brief intrusion, coupled with the persistent memories of her past, left her with an uneasy choice. The gentle glow of the lantern and the soft cadence of Samuel's lullaby lent warmth to her resolve, but the weight of that choice pressed heavily upon her heart. As the wind howled its somber tune outside, Clara reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against Elias's in a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken gravity between them. The silver locket's inscription, "Hold fast," echoed softly in her mind, a reminder that sometimes strength was found not in solitude, but in the willingness to trust another soul with one's burdens. In that delicate balance between the fading light and the encroaching storm, Clara hesitated on the precipice of choice. Would she let her past define her destiny, or dare to forge a new path together with Elias? One where trust could, perhaps, defy the relentless judgment of a cruel frontier? With the bounty hunter's shadow lingering still on the horizon, and the storm drawing ever nearer, the silence in the cabin was palpable. Clara's eyes, determined yet wistful, met Elias's as she prepared for a decision that would change everything. The night, thick with tension and possibility, left the future uncertain, a gentle promise of redemption intertwined with the looming threat of a past that would not easily let go. And as the final gust of wind rattled the window panes and soft, distant thunder heralded the tempest to come, Clara took a steady breath, choosing now to confront the uncertain path ahead, an act that would either bind her heart to Elias's or leave her alone in the relentless wilderness of the Wild West. Storm clouds swallowed the plains as Clara faced her choice. The tempest that had been gathering on the horizon finally broke, unleashing rain that battered the log cabin's tin roof and blurred the edges of the Wyoming landscape. In that tumultuous moment, under a sky roiling with furious dark, Clara decided to cast aside her lingering doubts. With resolute clarity, she accepted Elias's tender proposal, a promise of protection and shared burdens that had taken root amidst hardship and hope. That very afternoon, within the humble walls of a small chapel on the outskirts of Sage Hollow, Clara and Elias were married in a ceremony as quiet as it was profound. The chapel, built of weathered timber and lit by the soft glow of oil lanterns, was attended by only a few kindly souls, a local preacher known for his gentle sermons, and a neighbor whose eyes shone with shared understanding of loss. The pews, lined in faded calico, held a congregation of hearts open to miracles on the frontier. Clara stood at the altar with Samuel cradled in her arms, his tiny face pressed against her skirt, as if seeking the warmth of a new beginning. Elias, his broad frame softened by sorrow and hope, awaited her with a look that merged regret with quiet joy. The preacher intoned solemn words that mingled with the patter of rain against the stained glass windows, as if nature itself had lent its voice to the sacred pact being formed. There was no grand procession nor lavish fanfare, only the honest simplicity of two souls united to defy a world that had once cast them aside. Under the steady gaze of the heavens and the gentle murmur of prayer, Elias and Clara exchanged vows. "We stand together now, against all the sorrow this world may hurl our way," Elias said, his voice firm yet tender, the words echoing like a benediction on the wind. "I promise to shield you and little Samuel, and to share not only the burdens of the past, but also the dreams of tomorrow." Clara's reply, soft yet steady, resonated with quiet conviction. "I pledge to hold fast to hope, even in the raging storm. With you, I believe I can leave behind the venom of my past and build something enduring, a home, a family, and a future free from the chains of rejection." In that fragile moment, the silver locket that had come to symbolize Elias's lost sister and promise of resilience glimmered softly against the backdrop of the chapel's dim light. Its inscription, "Hold Fast," was a silent reminder to both that the strength to persevere lay within them. As Clara clasped Elias's hand, a subtle but transformative warmth passed between them, as if that simple phrase had sealed their union with an eternal bond. Yet, the sanctuary of the chapel was not entirely free of danger. Outside, the storm raged on, scattering the scattered remnants of the old world around them. No sooner had the vows been exchanged than a sudden, harsh knock startled the congregation. The sound, muffled by the roar of the wind and rain, carried an urgency that belied the fragile peace inside. Elias, eyes narrowing beneath the weight of unspoken warnings, rose from his pew. With measured steps, he moved toward the heavy wooden door, which groaned in protest as he opened it. There, framed by the cataract of rain and lightning, stood the bounty hunter, a solitary figure in a worn duster, his face half hidden beneath a battered hat. The man's eyes were cold and calculating, glistening like shards of ice in the sporadic light. "Ma'am, sir," the bounty hunter drawled, his voice as rasping as wind-whipped gravel. "I've come for what's rightfully mine." The words, laden with a grim finality, cut through the echo of thunder. "I know there's a reward on a woman of your kind, one whose kin were forsaken and whose babe, by some bitter twist of fate, carries an inheritance claimed by law and greed." Inside the chapel, silence fell, a tension as palpable as the rain drumming on the roof. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she tightened her hold on Samuel. In that fraught instant, Elias stepped forward, the strength of his resolve unmasked by the fury of the storm. "We stand together now," he declared, voice rising above the tempest. "There is no bounty on our family, nor will you find what you seek here." His words, both defensive and defiant, resonated through the small space. The bounty hunter's eyes flickered with malice, but the roaring storm seemed to muddle his intent. "You'll regret defying the law," he spat, his tone hinting at a promise of retribution. The man shifted his weight, the rain streaking down his weathered face as he stepped back into the darkness. For a long moment, the hallway between the chapel and the battered wooden door was filled only with the sound of the storm's assault. Inside, the congregation exhaled a collective sigh of relief, though the threat lingered like a specter in the shadows. The preacher revisited his solemn tones, urging that faith and unity hold fast against the fury of the world. And in that gentle cadence, Elias and Clara found a momentary assurance to let the words wash over them, each vow and promise a small beacon against the encroaching night. Once the bounty hunter retreated, Elias returned to Clara's side, his hand still warm and unyielding. "I reckon that threat may not vanish completely," he murmured, the storm's chill seeping into his bones. "But together, we'll find a way to guard against it. Our bond here today, our marriage, is more than a union. It's the beginning of a pledge to protect our future, no matter the cost." Clara, though shaken by the encounter, felt within her a resolute calm growing like a lantern in the storm. Gently cradling Samuel, she marveled how the child's innocent laughter, despite the howling wind outside, managed to pierce the gloom, a tender reminder that hope could bloom even amidst desolation. "Perhaps," she whispered, almost to herself, "we were meant to be, despite all the cruelty of our pasts. Today we hold fast to each other, and to the promise of a better tomorrow." In the days that followed, as the skies cleared and the storm gave way to a softer twilight, Clara began to embrace her new role within Sage Hollow. With Elias's unwavering support, she started trading with neighboring settlements, bartering goods both humble and precious, gradually weaving herself into the fabric of the tight-knit community. The very act of trading, of exchanging not just goods but stories and smiles, became for her a symbol of rebuilding a life from the scorched remnants of exclusion and despair. Elias, too, found solace in the shared labor of survival. His once solitary days were now filled with moments of gentle partnership, repairing the ranch fence under a sky washed with the hues of sunset, sharing quiet meals by the glow of candlelit lanterns, and on rare, peaceful mornings, listening to Samuel's delighted babbles as the young child learned to toddle amidst the dew-kissed grass. Together, they steeled themselves against the prejudice that had followed Clara like a persistent shadow, a reminder that the judgment of a bygone era was not so easily shed. Yet, the specter of that bounty hunter remained, a lingering threat that hovered at the fringes of their newfound sanctuary. Whispers circulated among the townsfolk, rumors of a stranger seeking retribution, of an inheritance lost in the labyrinth of bitter legal claims, that kept the community on a constant watch. Even as the chapel's walls and the ranch's open fields offered a haven, a sense of unease persisted like the echo of distant gunfire. One brisk evening, as Clara sat by the now-quiet hearth with Elias at her side and Samuel playing quietly at their feet, a knock at the door shattered the calm. Opening it just a crack, Elias caught sight of a trembling messenger, a slim, anxious man bearing fresh news from Sage Hollow. In halting, urgent tones, the messenger reported that a traveler had been seen approaching the ranch. His face was obscured beneath a threadbare hat, but his bearing was unmistakable, a quiet menace and determination in every step. As Elias and Clara exchanged a wary glance, the messenger continued, "The feller's been asking questions about the bounty, and he seems determined to follow through on what he claims is his due. Reckon he's not alone, either." The words were carried on a thin voice that trembled with a mix of fear and disbelief. Clara's heart sank at the news, a new ripple of uncertainty crashing over the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. Outside, the cool night air carried the promise of impending challenge, a subtle reminder that even on the wings of resolve and love, the threat of the past might yet return to test their strength. For a long moment, fatherly concern mingled with determined defiance in Elias's gaze. "We've faced storms before," he said quietly, his voice resolute yet tempered by sorrow. "No matter how hard the wind blows, we must stand together. Today, we united not only our lives, but our resolve to protect our dream. We'll see this through, ma'am." Clara nodded, drawing a deep, steadying breath as she clutched the locket that still whispered its silent message to her heart. Hold fast. In that enduring inscription, she found the strength to confront whatever may come. And as the stranger's impending arrival loomed as an uncertain whisper on the horizon, The promise of a united future shone like the soft glow of lanterns in a darkened room, a gentle yet unyielding beacon of hope that urged her onward. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken resolve and the murmurs of the coming threat, leaving the future suspended in a delicate balance, a balance that would soon demand action, testing the new family's courage and unity in the untamed heart of the Wild West. Dawn broke over Sage Hollow, whispering of a life reborn as hues of soft rose and amber crept slowly over the Wyoming plains. In the pale pre-dawn quiet, Clara stood at the weathered porch of the newly built log cabin, her eyes searching the misty horizon. The storm had passed, leaving behind a cleansed world and a promise of renewal. Her heart, once heavy with past betrayals and lingering fears, now thumped with determined hope, a hope nurtured through hardship and sustained by the gentle strength of Elias's unwavering devotion. That morning, as the cattle lowed softly in the distance and the sagebrush swayed to a whispered breeze, a knock on the cabin door startled the newfound peace. Opening it cautiously, Elias greeted a slender stranger, water dripping from his threadbare duster. The man's face was earnest and lined with concern. "I'm Josiah," he said, in a hushed tone that carried both respect and urgency. "I bring word from your kin." Clara's pulse quickened at the mention. Josiah, it turned out, was an emissary from the distant relatives who had once scorned her, a man sent not with weapons but with a letter that could settle old accounts. He explained that the bounty hunter, relentless in his pursuit of a reward tied to a disputed inheritance claim over a child, had finally received proof that Samuel was not, as they had falsely conjectured, the heir to a greedy estate. A long-forgotten letter, a missive penned by Clara's own estranged family, detailed how their claim was void, their hopes for gaining wealth through a misfortune dashed by a legal decree that bound Samuel to future freedom rather than inheritance. Josiah's words fell like a salve across Clara's weathered heart. In a trembling hand, he pressed the folded letter into hers. Under the scratchy lamplight inside the cabin, she slowly unfolded it. The paper was yellowed by time and sealed with a wax emblem that symbolized a once proud lineage now stained by greed. In clear, measured script, the letter confessed that her kin had long planned to exploit her plight, to claim Samuel and his future for their own dark purposes. It spoke of betrayal, of shattered familial bonds, and ultimately absolved her of any claim. The letter was both an apology and a renunciation, a final severance from the past that had sought to define her worth. Outside, the bounty hunter's looming threat took on a final, bitter note. With Josiah's letter as proof of Samuel's freedom from any malicious inheritance, the sinister figure had little reason to linger. Late that afternoon, as the wind carried away the remnants of the storm, word arrived that the bounty hunter had departed for good, his threats diffused by the clarity of evidence. There was no more bloodshed on the horizon, only the promise of a future shaped by honest labor and shared dreams. In the days that followed, Clara found herself embracing an unexpected destiny. With Elias's steadfast guidance, the couple set about building a modest trade post on the outskirts of Sage Hollow, a place where settlers and native townsfolk could barter goods, share news, and forge community ties far stronger than any whispered rumor. The trade post, constructed from rough-hewn logs and sturdy planks, quickly became a beacon for those seeking shelter from the harshness of frontier life. Clara, whose own hands had once trembled with fear and rejection, now moved with confident purpose. She organized bartering days with practiced ease, her gentle smile and natural grace winning over even the most skeptical neighbors. Every detail of that new beginning seemed imbued with symbolic meaning. The silver locket that so tenderly united her and Elias, its inscription hold-fast echoing as a constant mantra of resilience, was now a cherished emblem of their union. Elias, whose eyes still carried the ache of his lost sister, often looked at the locket as though it would remind him to keep his promise to Clara, a promise to shield their little family from the world's cruelties and prejudices. On a cool, starlit evening not long after the trade post had taken shape, the couple gathered those few who had come to call Sage Hollow home for a quiet vow renewal ceremony. Under a celestial tapestry of countless twinkling stars, Elias and Clara stood beneath a hand-carved arbor of juniper branches. In front of the gentle preacher and a handful of neighbors, they recited the vows they had longed to say on the day of their union in the chapel. "We've built more than a home," Elias intoned, his deep voice resonant against the silent whisper of the night. "We built a promise that no storm can wash away." Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she echoed his sentiment, her voice imbued with quiet triumph. "Together we hold fast, not just each other, but the life we forged from the fragments of a painful past." The exchange was tender and solemn, imbued with the deep understanding that the sanctuary they had painstakingly built was worth every hardship endured. Time, as it often does on the unforgiving frontier, marched onward. 5 years later, Sage Hollow had grown into a modest yet thriving community. The trade post had become a hub where sturdy buckboards, laden with produce and supplies, trundled along dusty roads. Clara now managed much of the barter and trade herself, her keen eye and gentle nature winning over skeptics and manning the pulse of the town. Samuel had blossomed into a spirited boy, quick-witted and full of the same hopeful determination that had once defined his mother's quiet resolve. With every laugh that bubbled from his lips and every small act of kindness he offered to the locals, he became not only a reminder of the family's rebirth, but also a symbol of Sage Hollow's promise. Elias continued to labor at the ranch with a vigor that belied his quiet introspection, always mindful of the past, yet fiercely hopeful for the future. The bounty hunter's menace had faded into an echo, a dark chapter that now served as a cautionary tale rather than a looming threat. What remained, however, was the enduring narrative of redemption and chosen family, a testament to the strength found in unity and the healing power of a love that had triumphed over prejudice and neglect. On one particularly clear evening, as silvery moonbeams danced upon the freshly paved pathways of the trade post, and the gentle murmur of contented voices filled the air, Clara took a quiet walk along the edge of town. In her hand, she clutched the silver locket, a relic that had witnessed their shared sorrows and victories. It gleamed softly in the moonlight, a quiet beacon urging her forward. There, near the entrance of a modest cabin newly constructed by an aspiring neighbor, a young woman approached, her eyes searching and uncertain. Clara stepped forward, offering a gentle smile. "Welcome, ma'am. Come, let me help you find your way," she said in a voice as warm as the glow of a hearth. That small act of kindness, tender and unassuming, encapsulated everything Clara had come to stand for, a life rebuilt from the ashes of rejection, now dedicated to the service of others who, too, sought refuge and hope. As she led the newcomer toward the comforting light of her humble abode, Clara's heart swelled with a gratifying certainty. In that singular moment, she understood that her journey, from the scorn of a fractured past to the luminous promise of tomorrow, had reached a triumphant new chapter. Standing at the threshold of her home, with the cool night air whispering of endless possibilities, and a luminous future unfurling like a promise at sunrise, Clara clasped a locket to her heart. Within its delicate silver curves lay all she had overcome, all that she had held fast to: love, resilience, and the enduring belief that even in the most barren of lands, hope can sprout like a seed in spring. And as the soft glow of the lanterns mingled with the stars above, the future of Sage Hollow, and the legacy of family united by choice and sacrifice, stretched out before her, a brilliant tapestry waiting to be woven with every act of kindness, every whispered promise, and every dream that refused to fade away.